Malik and his twin brother had just moved to Cedar Ridge, a small town tucked between rolling hills and quiet streets lined with old oaks. Their mom got a new job at the local hospital, and though she tried to sound excited about the fresh start, the boys could tell she was nervous too. They'd left behind their old neighborhood, the corner bodega where the owner always slipped them an extra cookie, their school friends, and most of all their dad's dojo, now closed since he passed 2 years ago. From the moment they stepped into Cedar Ridge High on their first day, they felt eyes on them. Not the curious kind, but the kind that made your shoulders tense. Whispers followed them down the hallway. A few kids snickered when they walked by. One guy even muttered something under his breath that sounded like wrong neighborhood. They kept walking heads high, just like their dad taught them. Don't let fear or anger steer your steps. Walk like you belong, because you do. At lunch, they sat alone at the end of a long table near the window. No one came over. That was fine, they were used to it. But then a group of older guys strolled past, led by a tall, broad-shouldered kid with a smirk that never quite left his face. He accidentally bumped Malik's tray, sending his apple rolling across the floor. "Oops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. His friends laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd seen all week. The twins didn't react. They just picked up the apple, wiped it on Malik's sleeve, and kept eating. Inside, though, their stomachs twisted. It wasn't the first time they'd faced this kind of thing. But here it felt sharper, louder, like the whole school was watching and waiting to see how they'd respond. After school, as they walked home along the tree-lined street, the same group pulled up in a beat-up pickup truck. They rolled down the window and started yelling nonsense, calling them names, asking if they got lost on the way to the city, making fake gang signs. One even threw a soda can that clattered near their feet. The twins kept walking, faster now, but not running. Running felt like giving them power. That night, in the garage behind their new house, they changed into their worn white uniforms. G's faded from years of use, but still crisp where it mattered. Without saying a word, they bowed to each other, then to the small photo of their dad taped to the wall. They began their kata, slow, deliberate movements that flowed like water, then snapped like fire. Punch, block, turn, step. Every motion was calm, controlled, precise. This was their safe place, the rhythm of their breath, the quiet thud of bare feet on concrete, the memory of their father's voice. A black belt isn't about fighting. It's about knowing when not to. They'd earned their black belts at 14, tested in front of their dad, and a room full of students who looked up to them. He'd hugged them both afterward, eyes glistening. "You've got the skill," he'd said. "Now comes the harder part, using it with wisdom." Back in Cedar Ridge, no one knew any of this. To their classmates, they were just the new black kids, quiet, serious, maybe even scary to some. The bullies seemed to feed off that fear, twisting it into something ugly. The ringleader, everyone just called him Brad, started showing up more often. He'd block their path in the hall, bump into them by accident, or make loud comments about people like them not belonging in this town. One morning, Malik found his locker spray-painted with a hateful word. His stomach dropped. He stood there, fists clenched at his sides, heart pounding. For a second, he thought about finding Brad and making him regret it. But then he remembered his dad's words. "Real strength is walking away when you could stay and destroy." He took a deep breath, wiped the paint off with his sleeve as best he could, and went to class. At home that evening, his brother didn't say much. He just handed Malik a warm towel and said, "We'll handle it our way." They both knew what that meant, not with fists, but with patience, with presence, with the quiet confidence that came from years of discipline. Still, the tension grew. Teachers acted like they didn't see what was happening. When Malik finally reported the locker incident, the vice principal sighed and said, "Boys will be boys. Just try to ignore it." That stung more than the paint. Their mom noticed the change, the way they checked the street before leaving the house, how they stopped wearing their hoodies in case someone said they looked suspicious, how they spoke less at dinner. One night she sat them down. "If it gets worse," she said gently, "we can look at other schools, or even move back." They both shook their heads. "We're not running," Malik said. His brother nodded. Dad didn't raise quitters. She hugged them tight, her voice soft. "Just promise me you'll stay safe." "We will," they said together. What no one in Cedar Ridge knew, and what the bullies would soon find out the hard way, was that these two quiet boys weren't just tough. They were trained, not to start fights, but to end them quickly, cleanly, and without hate. They carried that knowledge like a secret shield, worn close to the chest. For now, they kept their heads down, stayed out of trouble, and practiced every night in the garage. But deep down they sensed it. Things were about to change. The bullies were getting bolder, and sooner or later someone would push too far. When that moment came, the twins wouldn't lose control. They'd simply do what they'd been taught. Protect themselves, protect each other, and never, ever let fear or anger take the lead, and maybe, just maybe, their quiet strength would teach this town something it desperately needed to learn. The weeks rolled on, and the bullying didn't stop, it just got sneakier. At first it was loud and obvious. Shoves in the hallway, mocking laughs, ugly words scribbled on notebooks. But soon it turned into something quieter, more constant, like a low hum you couldn't shut off. The twins started noticing little things. Someone forgetting to pass them group work in class, teachers calling on them less, even the lunch lady giving them smaller portions like they didn't deserve as much as the others. It wasn't just one person anymore. It felt like the whole school had decided they didn't belong. Still, they kept their cool. Every morning they tied their shoes tight, straightened their backpacks, and walked through those school doors like they owned the place, even when their stomachs were knotted with dread. At night, they'd meet in the garage, put on their uniforms, and move through their forms. The rhythm soothed them: punch, block, turn, breathe. It was more than practice, it was therapy. Their father's voice echoed in their minds. Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget, but even discipline has its limits. One rainy Tuesday, things took a darker turn. After school, as they waited for the bus under the covered stop near the edge of campus, 3 older guys showed up, led by the same boy who'd ruined Malik's lunch on day 1. This time, they didn't just laugh. One of them stepped right into his brother's space, chest puffed out, voice low and sharp. You think you're tough, huh? Coming here like you own the place? He shoved him hard, once then again until his back hit the wet brick wall. Malik moved fast, stepping between them. Back off, he said, calm but firm. That only made them angrier. Another kid grabbed his arm, twisting it just enough to hurt. Or what? He sneered. You gonna cry to your mommy? They didn't throw punches. They didn't yell. But the twins stood their ground, eyes locked, shoulders squared. After a long, tense minute, the group finally backed off, laughing like they'd won something. But as they walked away, one of them turned and yelled a racial slur so loud it echoed off the empty buses. The twins didn't chase them. They just stood there, soaked and shaking, not from fear but from the effort it took not to react. That night their hands wouldn't stop trembling during kata. Their mom saw it. She didn't say much, just made them hot cocoa and sat with them in the garage until the shaking stopped. The next day, they reported it, again. This time they brought a witness, a quiet girl from their chemistry class who'd seen the whole thing. She'd been standing under the awning pretending to text, but her eyes had been wide with shock. She agreed to talk to the vice principal. But when they got to the office, the story changed. The vice principal sighed like he was tired of hearing it. Look, he said, leaning back in his chair. Unless someone's bleeding or there's video proof, there's not much we can do. These boys say it was just horseplay. And honestly, maybe you're reading too much into it. The word stung worse than the shove. Reading too much into it? Like being called names and pushed against a wall was normal. Like their pain was imaginary. They walked out of the office in silence. Outside, the girl who'd spoken up was waiting. She looked guilty, like she'd let them down. I'm sorry, she whispered. He barely listened to me. It's not your fault, Malik's brother said gently. She hesitated, then glanced around before stepping closer. Just be careful this weekend, she said quietly. Brad's been talking. He's planning something. Something big. For homecoming. The twins exchanged a look. Homecoming was in 2 days. A school dance, a football game, and a bonfire out by Hollow Creek. Most kids were excited. For them, it suddenly felt like a trap. That night, they practiced longer than usual. Their movements were sharper, faster, fueled by something deeper than routine. Their father had always said, martial arts isn't about winning fights. It's about never needing to have one. But what if someone didn't give you a choice? Their mom noticed the tension. You're not thinking of going to that bonfire, are you? She asked over dinner. We don't want to, Malik said. But if we skip it, they'll say we're scared. And if we go, who knows what they'll do. She put her fork down. Then don't go. Your safety matters more than what anyone thinks. We know, his brother said. But if we hide every time they threaten us, they'll never stop. She didn't argue. She just reached across the table and squeezed both their hands. Just promise me you'll come home in one piece. They nodded. But inside, they were already preparing. Not for a fight, but for whatever came next. The next day at school, the air felt charged. Whispers followed them. Brad and his group kept glancing over, smirking like they knew a secret. In the hallway, someone bumped into Malik hard enough to knock his books to the floor. No one helped him pick them up. Even kids who used to say hi now looked away. It was lonely, exhausting, but it also made something inside them harden, not with anger, but with clarity. They weren't here to prove they were tough. They were here to show that dignity doesn't back down even when it's outnumbered. That evening, they checked their gear. Old but strong wrist guards, clean uniforms folded neatly in their gym bags. Not because they planned to use them, but because they knew better than to be unprepared. Their father's last lesson hadn't been about kicks or blocks. It had been about choices. The moment you choose peace over pride, he'd said, that's when you become truly strong. But peace didn't mean weakness. And if someone forced their hand, they'd respond, not with rage, but with control. With precision. With everything their father had taught them. As they turned off the lights in the garage that night, one thought hung in the air between them, unspoken, but understood. This ends soon. One way or another. Saturday night came in cold and quiet, the kind of autumn evening where the wind carries the smell of dry leaves and distant bonfires. The twins had spent the whole day on edge. They'd skipped the football game, stayed home, and watched the clock tick toward dusk. They didn't plan to go to the bonfire at Hollow Creek, but then a text came through from a number they didn't recognize. It said, "Your friend's hurt. Needs help near the old bridge. Come alone." It sounded off. Too vague. Too convenient. But what if it was real? What if someone actually needed them? They debated for 10 minutes in the kitchen, voices low. "It's probably a trap," one said. "Yeah," the other replied. "But what if it's not?" In the end, they decided to go, but not alone and not unprepared. They changed into dark clothes, tucked their black belts into their pockets like good luck charms, and slipped out the back door. They didn't tell their mom. She was already worried enough. Hollow Creek Park was about a mile from town, past the last row of houses and down a gravel road that turned to dirt. The bonfire was roaring near the soccer field, music thumping, kids laughing, but the message had said, "Old Bridge." A rusted footbridge over the creek deep in the woods, far from the crowd. As they walked the trail, flashlights off, senses sharp, the woods grew quieter. Too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just the crunch of dry leaves under their shoes. Then they saw them. 6 boys stood in a loose circle near the bridge, silhouettes lit by the glow of a single phone flashlight. At the center stood Brad, arms crossed, grinning like he'd just won a prize. "Took you long enough," he called out. The twins stopped. "No panic, no shouting. Just stillness, you lied," one of them said calmly. "There's no one hurt," Brad shrugged. "Had to get you out here somehow." "Can't have your little fan club watching, can we?" One of the others stepped forward, swinging a baseball bat lazily in his hand. "Heard you think you're tough," he said. "Let's see how tough you are when you're on the ground." The twins exchanged a glance. No words needed. They'd trained for this, not for violence, but for moments when walking away wasn't an option. "Last chance," the one on the left said, voice steady. "Go home, this doesn't have to happen," Brad laughed. "Oh, it's happening." He lunged first, fast, angry, swinging a wild punch. But the twins had spent years reading movement, anticipating force. The punch never landed. One sidestepped, caught the arm, and twisted it gently but firmly behind the boy's back. Not to hurt, just to control. The boy yelped, more from surprise than pain. Chaos broke loose. 2 others charged. One swung the bat. The other kicked out. But the twins moved like water, slipping past swings, redirecting force, using the attacker's own momentum against them. A wrist lock here. A sweep of the leg there. They never threw a single punch meant to injure. Every move was defensive, precise, ending the threat without adding to it. One boy tripped over his own feet and landed hard in the dirt. Another tried to grab from behind, but a quick elbow shift and a controlled push sent him stumbling back into a tree, dazed but unharmed. Brad, now furious, came at them with both fists. "You think you're better than us?" he yelled. They didn't answer. One twin blocked the first swing, stepped inside the second, and used a simple shoulder throw, just like their father taught them, to guide Brad safely to the ground. Not slammed, not hurt, just down. For a moment everything stopped. The woods were silent except for heavy breathing. The twins stood side by side, calm, hands open at their sides, not clenched, not raised. Just ready. Brad sat up slowly, rubbing his shoulder, eyes wide with something new. Confusion. Maybe even fear. How'd you do that?" he stammered. "We didn't want to," the other twin said, "but we won't let you hurt us or anyone else." Just then a voice cut through the trees. I saw everything. It was the quiet girl from chemistry. She stepped into the clearing, phone in hand, screen glowing. "And I recorded it," she added. Brad's face went pale. His friends scrambled to their feet, looking around like they wanted to disappear. "You can't post that," one shouted. "I already sent it to the school counselor," she said quietly. "And the police." The twins didn't gloat. They didn't smirk. They just nodded at her, grateful but not surprised. They'd noticed her shadow following them down the trail earlier, staying far enough back not to be seen, close enough to help if needed. Brad stood up slowly, brushing dirt off his jeans. He looked at the twins, really looked at them, not with hate now, but with something like shame. You didn't even hit us," he muttered. "No," one of them said. "Because we're not like you." They turned and started walking back toward the road. The girl fell into step beside them. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," they said together. "We're okay." Behind them, the group stood frozen in the dark, the bat lying forgotten in the leaves. The walk home felt lighter, even though their hearts still pounded. They hadn't wanted this, but they'd handled it the only way they knew how, with control, with respect, with the lessons their father had carved into their bones. When they got home, their mom was waiting by the window. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door, wrapped them both in a hug, and whispered, "I knew you'd come back standing." Later in the garage, they changed back into their uniforms. Not to train, but to remember. They bowed to their father's photo, not in victory, but in gratitude, because tonight, they hadn't just defended themselves. They'd shown what real strength looks like, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change things in Cedar Ridge. By Sunday morning, the whole town seemed to know. The video the quiet girl had recorded spread faster than anyone expected. Not because it showed violence, but because it showed something rare, calm in the face of chaos. In the shaky footage, you could clearly see the group surrounding the twins, shouting, shoving, even swinging a bat. And then, instead of fists flying, you saw control, precision. Two boys moving like they'd done this 1,000 times, not to hurt, but to stop harm before it went too far. One kid got tripped, another gently pinned, Brad lowered to the ground without a single punch thrown. And through it all, the twins never yelled, never cursed, never lost their cool. People were stunned. At first, the school tried to downplay it. The principal sent out a vague email about an incident under review. But by Monday, parents were calling. Local news reporters showed up outside the school gates, and the video had thousands of views online. Comments poured in, some angry, some supportive, but most just confused. Why were 6 guys attacking 2? Why didn't the school do anything sooner? Who are these kids, and why can they move like that? The quiet girl, whose name no one even knew until now, finally spoke up. She gave a short statement to the local paper. Not to be a hero, she said, but because someone had to tell the truth. She described weeks of bullying, ignored reports, and how the twins never once fought back until they had no choice. That changed everything. The school board called an emergency meeting. Brad and his friends were suspended, not just for the attack, but for a pattern of harassment that teachers had overlooked for months. Mandatory anti-bias training was announced for all students and staff. The vice principal who'd brushed off complaints? He was put on administrative leave, but the real shift happened in the hallways. Kids who used to avoid the twins now looked at them differently, not with fear, but with respect. Some even nodded as they passed. A group of younger students started eating near them at lunch, not saying much, just wanting to be close to the quiet strength they'd seen on screen. One boy shyly asked, "Do you guys really know karate?" They just smiled and said, "We practice. That's all." Then came the invitation. An older man with silver hair and kind eyes showed up at their house one afternoon. He ran a small martial arts studio on the edge of town. Mostly kids' classes, self-defense for women, that kind of thing. He'd seen the video. "I've been teaching for 30 years, he said, sitting at their kitchen table with their mom. "And I've never seen restraint like that in teenagers. You didn't fight to win. You fought to protect. That's rare." He asked if they'd be willing to help him run a weekend workshop, teach other kids how to defend themselves without losing their humanity. Their mom hesitated. "I don't want them in the spotlight anymore," she said. But the twins looked at each other and nodded. "We'll do it," one said. "But only if it's about more than fighting. It has to be about respect, about knowing your worth," the man smiled. "That's exactly what I had in mind." Meanwhile, their mom found herself getting stopped at the grocery store, at the post office, even in the hospital parking lot. People apologized for not speaking up sooner, for pretending not to see what was happening, for letting fear keep them silent. She didn't scold them. She just thanked them for finally seeing her boys for who they really were. At home, things felt lighter. Not perfect, but lighter. They still practiced in the garage every night, but now there was less tension in their movements. More peace. One evening, their mom brought out their father's old training journal, the one filled with notes, sketches of stances, reminders like, "Strength without kindness is noise," and "Protect the quiet ones, they're often the strongest." She placed it on the workbench. "He'd be proud," she said softly. "Not because you defended yourselves, but because you did it his way." The twins touched the worn cover, fingers tracing their dad's handwriting. They hadn't done this for praise. They'd done it because it was right. But hearing that, it helped. Then something unexpected happened. Brad's mom called. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame anyone else. She just said, voice trembling, "I saw what my son did, and I'm so sorry. He's not a bad kid. He's just been taught the wrong things. Is there any way he could learn from you? Not just about fighting, but about how to be better." The twins were quiet for a long time. They remembered the look on Brad's face in the woods, confused, ashamed, almost lost. They knew hate wasn't born, it was learned. And if it could be learned, maybe it could be unlearned too. "We'll think about it," they told her. That night they talked it over in the garage, sitting on the floor in their uniforms. "Do we really want him around?" One asked. "I don't know," the other said. "But if we say no, we're doing the same thing they did to us, shutting someone out because of who they used to be." They didn't have to forgive him right away, but they could give him a chance to change. A few days later, the local newspaper ran a front-page story. "Cedar Ridge teens show the world what real strength looks like." There was a photo of the twins standing side by side, not smiling but calm, eyes steady, shoulders straight. Underneath, a quote from their mom. They didn't want to be heroes. They just wanted to walk home safe. The town started talking not just about bullying but about belonging, about how silence helps no one, about how courage isn't always loud. And for the first time since they'd moved to Cedar Ridge, the twins felt like they might actually be seen, not as outsiders, not as threats, but as people. As brothers. As sons carrying their father's legacy forward, one quiet step at a time. They still kept their guard up. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But now, when they walked down the hall, they didn't lower their eyes. They held their heads high, not in pride, but in peace, because they'd proven something important. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, the quietest strength speaks the loudest. Graduation day arrived with soft morning light and the smell of fresh-cut grass. The twins stood in their caps and gowns, not smiling too wide, not frowning either, just present, calm, like they'd finally found their place in a town that once made them feel invisible. Their mom sat in the third row, hands clasped tight, eyes glistening. She'd made it through the hard days, the sleepless nights, the fear that this place would break her boys. But here they were, whole, steady, and stronger than anyone expected. The ceremony moved slowly, names called one by one. When it was their turn, the applause was louder than for most. Not wild or showy, just warm, real, like the whole school was finally saying, "We see you." Afterward, as students hugged and took photos, a small group gathered near the bleachers. It was the self-defense workshop crew, the kids they'd started teaching just a few months ago. Some were shy, some loud, all different. A few had been bullied themselves. Others just wanted to feel safe walking home. Every Saturday morning, they'd meet at the community center, rolling out mats, learning how to block, how to breathe, how to say no with their whole body. But the twins always made sure the lessons went deeper. Martial arts isn't about knocking someone down, one would say. It's about standing tall enough that no one makes you feel small. And now, those kids stood together like a quiet army of change. Even Brad was there, standing a little apart, hands in his pockets, but he came. He'd shown up to the first workshop nervous, eyes down, expecting glares. Instead, he got a handshake and a simple rule. You show up with respect, you get respect. He didn't talk much at first, but week by week he listened. He learned. And one day he stayed after class and quietly apologized, not with big words, just, I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't know better. But I want to. They didn't hug. They didn't act like old friends. But they nodded, and in that nod was something powerful, the chance to start over. The twins had also started something bigger, a program they called Guardians of Peace. It wasn't just about kicks and blocks. It mixed self-defense with honest talks about race, respect, and what it means to belong. Local teachers volunteered. Parents came to listen. Even the mayor showed up once, sitting in the back, taking notes. What began as a way to protect themselves had grown into a space where others could heal, learn, and stand together. Their mom watched all this with quiet awe. She'd worried they'd carry bitterness forever. Instead, they chose to build something good from the pain. At the graduation party, their neighbors threw in the backyard, paper lanterns strung between trees, burgers on the grill, music low and steady. The twins slipped away for a moment. They walked to the garage, now cleaned up and turned into a small training space for the community program. On the wall hung their father's photo, a new plaque beneath it that read, Strength with honor, peace with purpose. They bowed, like they always did. Not out of habit, but gratitude. Later that evening, one of them was asked to say a few words. He stepped up on the porch, no notes, just heart. People keep calling us brave, he began, voice calm but clear. But bravery isn't never being scared. It's doing what's right even when you are. We didn't move here looking for a fight. We just wanted to go to school, help our mom, remember our dad. But when people tried to make us feel less than, we had a choice, shrink or stand. We chose to stand, not with anger, but with everything we'd been taught. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Classmates, teachers, neighbors, even a few who'd once looked away. Real strength isn't in how hard you hit. It's in how gently you can hold your ground. It's in walking away from hate without becoming hateful yourself. And it's in giving people, yes, even the ones who hurt you, a chance to be better. No one clapped right away. They just sat with his words, letting them sink in. Then slowly, the applause started. Soft at first, then louder, until it filled the whole yard. After the party, as fireflies blinked in the dusk, the twins sat on the porch steps, black belts folded neatly in their pockets, a quiet tribute not for show but for memory. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They knew what they'd been through, what they'd built, and where they were headed. They'd been accepted to the same college not far from home, where they planned to study psychology and education. Their dream? To take Guardians of Peace to other towns, places where kids might be facing the same silence, the same fear. They wanted to teach that your skin color doesn't define your worth, and your past doesn't lock your future. As the night deepened, their mom came out and sat between them, wrapping an arm around each. You made it, she whispered. We had help, one said. And we're not done, the other added. She smiled. I know. In the months that followed, Cedar Ridge kept changing, slowly, imperfectly, but surely. The school added a student-led diversity council. Teachers started anti-bias training that actually meant something, and every Saturday morning the community center buzzed with kids learning not just how to protect their bodies, but how to honor each other's humanity. The twins never sought fame. They didn't want headlines. They just wanted to live in a world where no kid had to walk down a hallway afraid of who they were. And maybe, just maybe, they'd helped build a little piece of that world right here. Years later, when people in Cedar Ridge talked about turning points, they didn't mention the video or the suspension or even the graduation speech. They talked about the quiet Saturdays at the community center, about kids of all colors bowing to each other before practice, about laughter mixing with focused drills, about a town learning that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the presence of courage, kindness, and second chances. The twins never called themselves heroes, but to a whole generation of kids in that town, they were something even better, proof that you can be gentle and strong at the same time, and that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground without ever throwing a punch.